Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Tuesday afternoon webinar on issues related to Korea and Northeast Asia. This is going to be really interesting because we're going to talk about the fact-finding trips that we've been doing over the past nearly 40 years. We started them actually in Russia and actually before that in Latin America. So this has been a long time thing. So we knew how to kind of explore a country by the time we started getting around to Korea. So I'm happy to introduce our moderator and one of our speakers today who's led a number of these tours, Dr. Michael Jenkins. He is chairman of Universal Peace Federation USA and president of UPF International, and has done a lot of initiatives around the world, peace initiatives in the Middle East and Northeast Asia. So he's a veteran at this. Dr. Jenkins, welcome.
Thank you, Larry. I'm very happy to be with you, and this is a great opportunity. Right now, we are going to have our regular weekly webinar dealing with North and South Korea. And I'm very honored to present to you also Congressman Dan Burton and also Congressman Todd Tiahrt, as well as Mr. Larry Moffat. I'm going to give a brief presentation on our fact-finding trips in the past. So I would like to present that at this time. This is sponsored by the Universal Peace Federation in conjunction with the Washington Times Foundation. We've been doing fact-finders for quite a number of years, but in the last 7 years, there has been significant collaboration between the Universal Peace Federation and the Washington Times Foundation. And that also gives us support from the Washington Times media publication. So I'd like to just share my screen here and we'll begin.
A picture of me standing up in the past.
All right. Just to give you a little background, we've been working together for a number of years, also with the International Leadership Conference. And in November 30th, 2016, Congressman Burton partnered together with Senator Orrin Hatch in the Kennedy Caucus room, and we invited members of Congress as well as parliamentarians from around the world. And we were together with the founder of the Washington Times, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, and Senator Hatch hosted it, introduced Congressman Burton and welcomed the delegation, and that was the founding of the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace. And Congressman Dan Burton is the international co-chairman of the IAPP, the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace. There are now 6,500 current members of the parliament and thousands more former members together throughout the world. And we're very honored to present Congressman Burton today. He is a co-chair with former Speaker of the Philippine Parliament, Speaker Jose de Venecia. So that was the kickoff meeting on November 30th, 2016. And it was quite a tremendous delegation there. There was about 300 total. And then we began fact-finders to Korea with those delegations. We had actually started a couple years earlier, but here's Colonel Minich from the U.S. Army. He was the main liaison between North and South Korea during that time. Again, that was the end of the Obama period. And then also you see Bill Gertz here, John Solomon, some of the key Times personnel. And we were there at the DMZ at Panmunjom. There's Guy Taylor, Dr. Manzaroff from Georgetown University, Mrs. Burton, and many other experts. And as you see, when you go to that Panmunjom, it's always, you're really, when you cross that line that divides the room, you're actually standing in North Korea. And when you step into that area, they always, soldiers come forward to the window, videotaping, taking photographs. And it's quite serious, quite serious. Right now is one of the most serious times once again, because things are still in flux. Things are not stable. And that delegation was very helpful. Congressman Tiahrt was also with us on this delegation right here with his wife, Mrs. Vicky Tiahrt. About 7 congressmen came on this trip, as well as the former director of the CIA, James Woolsey, and a lot of journalists. Again, there's Tom McDivitt, the chairman of the Washington Times. So that was an important experience. Congressman Todd McEwen and his wife were with us there too. So then we were introduced, as we came back to Seoul, we were introduced to defectors. This person here, I won't name him, but he is a very prominent, widely known defector. He was in charge of cyber warfare. He was in charge of training young people how to use the computer cyber warfare effectively to steal billions of dollars, and also to be able to, have tremendous effect on military, also every kind of institution in America and around the world. And the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee for Korea met Congressman Burton, Congressman Tiahrt, and our delegation with Larry, Tom McDivitt. And what happened there was the chairman of Foreign Affairs said they get more than 10,000 attacks every day in South Korea, 10,000 cyber attacks per day on all institutions, especially military, especially financial, and any way to create a difficulty. He defected because in his role as over cyber training and cyber development, he came across some videos from South Korea that were just soap operas, very warm, friendly family soap operas. And he thought it was a great movie. He didn't want to get rid of it. And he made the mistake of sharing it with a friend, and that friend told on him, and he went to the North Korean labor camp. And in that labor camp, he no longer felt any affinity to North Korea, and he escaped eventually. And it's quite amazing. But here's an example of the training schools that start from young children at a very young age. If they get very proficient at this development, they can have tremendous benefits. Unlike the majority of Korean people who are living in poverty and North Korean people are living in poverty, these young people, if they become proficient at really hacking and doing everything, then they become soldiers that are also given tremendous support. Their families are given a lot of benefits. And so they're highly motivated to succeed. And this is just one picture of one small unit, but there are thousands of them. And the IP address, the chairman of Foreign Affairs shared with us then, the IP address is coming from a location in China, which was kind of shocking. But there's a lot going on there. What the defector told us in that briefing was that Sony and the disruption of Sony and the hacking of all their emails and everything and stopping the movie that the North Korean chairman was upset with, he said that was like child's play. Businesses are so easy to hack into. But, the United States, he said, is the toughest in the world. But still, we should be well aware of what we're dealing with. Ambassador Christopher Hill was part of our delegation on numerous occasions. And also, he's hosting the Washington Brief on every first Tuesday of the month, along with Dr. Manzroff and Ambassador Joe Detrani. So it's a great delegation. We had the president of the Washington Times on there, Mr. Larry Beasley, and his wife, Lori. We had Mr. Charles Hurt, a great opinion editor for the Times, and the delegation. So these fact-finding tours are usually chaired by Congressman Burton and either a Washington Times representative like Mr. Beasley, or here, one of the U.S. ambassador to the six-party talks, Mr. Joseph Detrani. He co-chaired this delegation. Again, we go to the National Assembly. Chairwoman, she was former chair of Foreign Affairs, Chairwoman Na, and various delegations we meet. We went to Camp Humphreys, we're hosted there by the military, and we have people there from Heritage Foundation. The deputy or the chief of staff for NSC was there with us on this delegation. And we, get a briefing from the military. And then we went to the ROK Navy Museum and saw the Cheonan, the ship that was destroyed by North Korea. 46 sailors of South Korea died on that ship. And it was an explosion under the water, and the shock wave of the water cut the ship basically in half. Then we go to the Blue House and get a briefing. Here's Ambassador Kim Young-jong. He is now the chief advisor to President Moon in Korea on diplomacy and security. He has risen to that position. And he's a very, very good ally of the United States as the ROK is, and we are also working together. Also, our delegation was always invited to share some time with the Director of Intelligence at the NIS. Then we go to Foreign Affairs, and this is a picture with Kang Kyung-hwa, the former Foreign Affairs. She was changed in January, but foreign minister of the Republic of Korea, with Ambassador Woolsey and Congressman Burton. Then we get into kind of a face-to-face dialogue with the ministers or the foreign, the foreign minister or the chairman of the Unification Committee. And there's our delegation there. And again, we go to the Ministry of Unification, have the same kind of dialogue with the ministers of the government and also delegations. And then we collaborate. There's a lot of exchange of information and understanding. We always go to the National Assembly. We have great dialogue there. And this is Congressman Burton again leading the delegation, CIA director to his right, Joe Detrani to his left. And that was a very good engagement. And this gentleman here, Mr. Lee Soo-hyuk. Mr. Lee Soo-hyuk is now Ambassador Lee is the ambassador to the United States from Korea. He's in Washington now. He's an outstanding ambassador and a good friend of ours. He's a very good friend of our delegations. These fact-finding trips are so important because you build friendships. And it was very interesting here because Joe Detrani was the U.S. representative to the six-party talks. Ambassador Lee Soo-hyuk was the representative of Korea. So for 2 years or more, Joe and also Ambassador Lee collaborated together. So the friendship was already there. So again, then we went to Japan also. We're going to Japan, we're going to various countries, and we were welcomed by the LDP headquarters there, and there's many important discussions that went on. And we had 7 meetings at the LDP headquarters with many of the key members of the Diet. Many of them became the ministers. One became the Minister of Defense, the other became Minister of the Foreign Minister. So they got to be friends through those dialogues. We got a briefing at Yokota Air Force Base, and this is what we usually do. We always connect with our U.S. Military and our allies, and this was a great briefing, as it was when we went to the Humphreys Humphreys Army Base. We always get the top level briefing. It's just an excellent experience. But here we learned how important the collaboration between Japan and Korea and the United States is. GSOMIA, the agreement that shares military intelligence, had just been really solidified during this time. And it really showed the cooperation between Japan, Korea, and the U.S. military intelligence. That's so important because even though administrations change, actually the military is quite stable and quite secure. So that was very, very important briefing. We had a sitting congressman with us there, and General Ciapriati gave us this briefing. So it was excellent. You start to get the inside story of what they see on the ground. And these are a number of congressmen right here, Congressman Loretta Sanchez, Congressman Matt Salmon, and our chairman. Also next to him is Kevin Mayer, who's an expert in Japan, who's a diplomat for 25 years. So this is all very good. And here is a very nice part of this delegation. We had the president of the Washington Times and the chief security.
Did you see my hard copy on the top? Yeah.
So then also Congressman Burton and our delegation went to the Japanese Diet. We were hosted there by 50 Japanese members of the Diet, and it was just an excellent dialogue and excellent session where we could exchange our views and strengthen the friendship. Here's Congressman Tiahrt right there. He spoke, and then John Doolittle. And again, our delegation builds this friendship. Honorable Minoru Kawa just received Congressman Burton on June 11th. June 11th, there was a briefing that he organized in the Japanese Diet. Dan did a very excellent video encouraging them for collaboration with the U.S. And there's been some collaboration there. And Dan is, of course, quite influential on the Hill, as is Todd. And they were able to, talk about educational exchange and building the friendship. So there's going to be some Zoom collaboration on that. And this is just an outstanding experience. There's Dr. Ki-Hoon Kim, who was guiding us at the foundation for a long time. Again, Matt Salmon just announced 2 days ago he's running for governor of Arizona. I think he's got a very good prospect there. So I hope that gives you some feeling about the Factfinders. And then I want to turn to Larry right now, Mr. Larry Moffat, who is the vice president of the Washington Times Foundation. And Larry's going to talk about an earlier factor he did in North Korea. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jenkins. This was in 1988. We were asked to organize the predecessor to the Times Foundation was asked to organize and conduct a trip to North Korea of mostly for former assistant secretaries of state, some former members of Congress. The late Congressman Richard Icord was one of the leaders, and Tomiko Duggan and a few other people. Antonio Betancourt was also with us, helping to organize. One of the former assistant secretaries of state was Ambassador Douglas MacArthur II, who, rang all the bells in North Korea because he was the nephew and namesake of General Douglas MacArthur, who had fought North Korea to a draw maybe 50 years earlier. And so we went there and we got the VIP treatment, stayed in the government, special government guest house. I learned later that was their top one. It was very close to the official residence or office of Kim Il-sung. One of the things this provided was an opportunity to observe Kim Il-sung up close. It was a memorable meeting. We had a group picture. We all gathered around and we're talking and standing all around him. The photographer only approached him from one side because he had a large growth, like a small tennis ball almost, on the side of his neck, and it was kind of soft. So I was talking about somebody later, and they said it probably wasn't malignant then. But the photographer would make sure that never got in the photo. He just knew to do that. And but I was standing at like a foot away from it, and I was just observing it. So I'm thinking about that. In the lunch was this. Our whole delegation was 20 some people, I think, about 22, and it was a large round table, and they use the standard, I guess, Chinese protocol where they have the host, then they have the first guest, second guest, then second host, third host, guest host, and it goes all the way around. And as the organizer of the tour, I was like the public face, but actually low on the protocol totem pole. So I ended up sitting directly opposite, exactly opposite the other end of this large round table from Kim Il-sung. So I got a chance to observe him. And, he came up into power at a time where he was put into power by Russia. He took a train trip to Moscow and made enough friends there. So they kind of installed him as the head of North Korea when they were putting in the leader. They didn't know it was going to turn into a dynasty, but he was put in charge by the Russians, and so he was going around, and so he had to kind of work his way up and fight his way in there. So he had to, he wasn't just this lionized great leader all the time. He had to work the room and make he had to do his PR relations inside his own country with his people and get rid of his enemies or do whatever it takes. So he understood what it was like to need to do PR, and he was extremely good at it. He would sit at the table, and I watched him very closely. He'd kind of go around the table, this guy. He would look at each guest because everybody was always looking at him. So he'd catch their eye very carefully, and just this big smile, big radiant smile, like you're the most important person in the room. And he would do the next one, very methodical, work his way around. And I saw him, he was working his way around to me, and he got to me, turned on his high beams. And I felt, wow, this guy's great. He's not so bad after all. This kind of feeling was going on. And he was just, and he was just working it. And he did that. And he did everybody in the room at least 4 times during the course of the dinner. So it was a dinner and he was having conversation and stuff like that. But at the same time, he was very focused on what he needed to do in public relations terms. And he was very, very cordial toward Ambassador Douglas MacArthur II. So that was, and we went around and we saw a lot of things. We had handlers. I had known from doing a lot of trips to Russia that the handlers, they're in some ways their job security was on the line, but I didn't know how much, because we had a little freedom in Russia, but we stopped at a dollar store there where we could unload our hard currency and get some little souvenirs. And across the park there was our hotel, and I told my guide, I said, after I buy some stuff, maybe I'll just walk across the park to the hotel and meet you there. And as the color drained out of her face, and I thought, wow, there's more than just a reprimand on the line for her. So I said, never mind, I'll get on the bus. We're good. And I went and shopped and came out and got on the bus. And we all behaved ourselves, and we were a good group for them. There was sometimes there are protocol errors, and this is just I'll just kind of close with this one. It was there's a difference between being the assistant director and being the assistant to the director. It's an enormous difference. So, the got kind of switched up a little bit, and I might have been thought of as the assistant to the director or even the director, because they put you in rooms according to your status. And my room was huge. It was enormous. You may have seen the office in the top. It was like a ballroom. It was maybe 40 feet on a side or 30 feet on a side. Right in the middle of the room was a very small single bed. That was my bed. And then on the edges of the room, there was a TV, a refrigerator, some chairs, but everything was like 20 feet away. And I was like there in this little room, and everything was 20 feet away. And the bathroom was, I don't know, the size of Mrs. Trump's walk-in closet or something like that. It was enormous. It was just amazing. I've never seen anything like it. And on the last day, and I was remarked on the bus, wow, we sure have nice rooms. And everybody's kind of, I thought, well, maybe they think I'm easily impressed. But when I saw, on the last day in the guest house, I visited Congressman Icord's room, and it was this very small, ordinary little hotel room kind of thing. The rest of the rooms in the thing. And I had one of the, I guess, where presidents stay, except they knew I was by myself, so it was a little single bed. But it was this enormous kind of situation, kind of a real mess up. So I kept my mouth shut, because to try to correct it at that point would have made it worse. So it was a wonderful trip. I learned a lot. I gained a lot of, I had already learned a lot of, that was maybe my 8th or 9th communist country to be in, including Vietnam, West, East Germany, and Russia, and many of the republics around there. So I learned a lot about how communism operates. It's very similar in all the countries. And one time we had some Russian delegates that we were friends with kind of during the Cold War, and we were doing some things. They met Father and Mother Moon. And at one point we took them to China. We weren't allowed to go on that trip, but they flew to North Korea for a couple of days, and we waited for them in China. And they came back, and I asked one of the guys, I says, what was it like? And he said, oh my God, he said, it was Orwellian. And this was a Cold Warrior Russian who had grown up under Stalin, and he knew what Orwell was. So that shook him. So anyway, it was a very interesting experience, and we had a chance to make some acquaintances. I don't know if you call them friends, because everything's on a very official protocol level. Oh, and he gave us a copy of his 2-volume memoir, and we asked him if he would sign them. So they gathered them all up, took them, and he signed them all for us. I just found out I was going to be on the air. Otherwise, I'd bring it. It's at the office. But we, in an official protocol way, we met friends that ended up being as close as we could get We first set this up by visiting the UN mission. North Korea had a mission in the UN. That was about their only president in the United States, and met them. And so they became acquaintances then, and those people are rotated fairly often. But it was an amazing experience, and they loved Ambassador Douglas MacArthur. It was like, you know, oh, and also on another, went on another trip, but this was very interesting. I had visited this was after one of the large weddings in 1992, I think, thousands of couples. North Korea invited, I think they invited Reverend and Mrs. Moon to come, but they couldn't go. So they brought 100 couples. And I went along as one of the chaperones, and Tomiko was there too. And so was Tom Ward and Bill Lay and Antonio and a few others. And we went to North Korea, and we saw, we had another experience there. We went to Kumgang Mountain, and oh, also here's something about that trip. They knew all about us. They knew all about Divine Principle. They knew about us. They knew that there's an offering period of, you know, the husbands and wives remaining separated for a short time before they start their family as a kind of a spiritual offering. This was a church gathering, and they went there, and so they set up separate accommodations for men and women. They just automatically knew that, and they took very good care of us.
Thank you, Larry.
Mm-hmm.
A very interesting experience. I know you were a part of the delegation that also went to Russia and met President Gorbachev, and it was long after that that the Berlin Wall fell down. We believe that the DMZ, if properly addressed through the Alliance of America, the ROK, and our allies throughout the world, it also can eventually be dissolved, and that North and South Korea can come together peacefully. So I'd like to turn to Congressman Todd Tiahrt. Congressman Tiahrt is an outstanding diplomat and statesman. And Todd, if you would please to these issues. He served from Kansas for many years in Congress as a Republican, and he's an engineer and also a man who really understands the seriousness of this challenge. Go ahead, Todd.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Jenkins. And I really enjoyed what Larry Moffat was saying about these trips, because when I was first invited to go, I was a little bit hesitant. I didn't think that facing such a large problem as peace, that I could have any impact on what was going on. But then I realized, you know, in my first week is when I went to work for the Boeing company as an engineer, I was on my way to work and I was driving up a hill out in rural Kansas. I came across a guy who was stuck. He couldn't get out of the mud. He couldn't get to work. And so I parked my car, I got out and I went and got behind his, and I tried to push and I couldn't get it to move forward. And pretty soon Stan Harrison, one of my neighbors, drove up and he got out and he joined me behind the other neighbor's car, and we pushed together. And still we could not make any progress in getting that car going down to work. Finally, a third neighbor stopped and he got out behind us, and all three of us pushed at the same time, and that car finally caught and the gentleman was able to go on to work. And I realized, you know, if you work together, a lot of times you can get something done. Well, on these peacekeeping trips, I've been to South Korea and I've been to Japan with these delegations. And I'll use Ambassador Lee as an example. We found an ally, someone who has a similar heart and soul for peace. And so now we're working together. It's like this peace process is stuck at the mud at the bottom of the hill, and we need to have somebody else get out of the car and help push along. Well, now here's Ambassador Lee standing next to us, pushing on the peace process, trying to get it out of the mud so it's no longer stuck in the mud. And then we go to the other countries, and other people who have a similar heart and soul for peace will get behind and push against this seemingly unattainable task of obtaining peace, but we're gaining momentum. And so these delegation trips have made a great deal of difference, I think, in the process, by gaining allies like Ambassador Lee, who's now the ambassador to the United States, what a wonderful opportunity for us to move the peace process forward when an ally, someone who has the same likeness in thought, mind, and soul for peace, works together with the United States and all our resources here to move this forward. We don't want the peace process to get stuck in the mud. Now, I've met some wonderful people. When we were in South Korea, we were able to meet with the head of the intelligence department of South Korea. And we realized then that there are many obstacles that are facing this challenge of bringing peace not only to Korea, but across the face of the globe. And then we went to the DMZ and we saw some of these things that he was talking about actually in action, where they were taking pictures of us through the window while we were standing in these meeting buildings in the DMZ between North Korea and South Korea. But we know that by working together and by talking about this process of peace and in convincing others and gaining allies and all joining our shoulders together to push this process forward, that we have a real possibility of making a difference, making a peaceful world, making a unified Korea, bringing the opportunity for our kids and grandkids. And so it's been a very worthwhile effort, I think, for me to participate in. And I'm really very thankful for Dr. Hak Jong Moon for what she has done to move this process forward, for Dr. Jenkins and for Larry Moffat and others, Tom McDivitt. They have all worked together to give us a chance to get this peace process moving, to get it out of the mud. And as we travel and meet with other people, we get more and more folks who are willing to put their shoulder to the wheel and move this process forward. So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be part of this. And I'm very glad that I could join with friends like Congressman Dan Burton, who's been a wonderful leader in organizing legislators all over the globe to become part of this process, to get their shoulder to the wheel, to push this peace process forward. So Michael, thank you for the opportunity to let me address your group. It's wonderful to see so many people that have the heart and soul for a peace process. They're willing to put their shoulder against the wheel too. God bless.
Thank you. Michael, you're muted. Dr. Jenkins, you're muted.
Thank you, Congressman Tiahrt. You always help develop the engagement, and we also continue to dialogue with these counterparts we meet in Korea and Japan, and they think the world of you, and we're grateful for America's leadership there, which is exemplified by Congressman Tiahrt, Congressman Burton. We don't want war. We must have a strong military. We must be unequivocal about our response to these threats. But at the same time, that really won't solve the problem unless we are able to engage in such a way that builds some opportunity or vision for a peaceful future for Korea, United States, Japan, and China, and the other parties that are there, and such as Russia. It's very important that we find a way for peace. And one of the great statesmen I've come to know through this engagement is Congressman Dan Burton. In 1983, he was elected to the U.S. Congress, took office in 83, and then served for 30 years in 2013. He's 30 years on the Foreign Affairs Committee, was chairman of many of the subcommittees of foreign affairs, including the Asia and the Pacific. We count him as a great expert on these things and also diplomacy. He's leading the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace. What's very interesting to our listening audience, and I see that we have many people here from the State Department and also from intelligence community and diplomacy. To you, we are very thankful for your work. We're very interested, but Congressman Burton now has an association of members of parliament in communist countries that have diplomatic relations with North Korea. And they also meet with us in our educational conferences. We're not political, we're educational. But in those conferences, we build friendships and dialogue, and we have ways to better communication. So I'm very honored to present to you now Congressman Dan Burton, chairman of the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace. Dan?
Hey, Mike, thank you very much. And it was nice to see my old buddy, Todd Tiahrt. You know, Todd, if I looked that good with a beard and mustache, I think I'd have one. You look awful good. One, one of the things I feel is extremely important is that we have parliamentarians from around the world, as you said, Mike and Todd, talking to each other and working with each other in a very difficult time. Right now, people, they read their newspapers. And when they read their newspapers, I think many of them think that war is inevitable and that the problems we face in the world are insoluble. We can't get them solved. But organizations like the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace and other organizations that Mother Moon has worked so hard to create, I think can have a tremendous impact on solving these problems and creating an era of peace. We live in a very dangerous world right now. The countries all around the world now have nuclear weapons. In a very short period of time, a button could be pushed, somebody could get angry, things go off the rails, and we could see a real nuclear holocaust. And that's something that mankind cannot endure. We cannot allow to happen. And that's why it's so important that we work together. I know we have members of the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace that are from communist countries and totalitarian countries. And we don't agree with them on a lot of the governmental policies and issues. But the one thing we do agree on is we want peace. We don't want war. We don't want a Holocaust that could kill millions and millions of people. World War I killed over 50 million people. World War II killed over 50 million people at least. And the other wars and conflicts we've seen have killed millions of people as well. And in the nuclear age, if we ever have another conflict like we've seen in the past, hundreds of millions of people could be killed and humanity could suffer dramatically. And that's why it's so important that we have organizations that are working toward solving these problems in a peaceful way. Dr. Hak Jahan Moon and her husband, Father Moon, when he was alive, they realized how important it is to get people to talk. If you can get people to the conference table and talk, even if they have huge differences, they can usually work out some kind of an accommodation with one another. We may not agree, but we can agree on one thing, and that is there must be a road to peace that eliminates the possibility of war and conflict. And so one of the things I'm so happy about with Mike and Todd and John Doolittle and Larry and others is that we've been able to go to Korea and to other parts of the world, Japan and other places, and talk to people about the prospects for solving our problems in a peaceful way. Now, our governments around the world under President Trump and now President Biden, they're conversing with one another and they're talking with the leaders in these various countries. And that's very important. But even though they're doing their part in talking to one another, it's extremely important that we get together with the people in the legislative branches, the people on the street, the business people, and talk to them about the problems that we face and ways to solve our problems in a non-military way, in a non-nuclear way, in a non-war way. And so one of the things that I feel so strongly about in working with my colleague in the Philippines and Mike and others is that we're creating a very large organization, thousands and thousands of parliamentarians from around the world who want to solve these problems in a peaceful way. In fact, when we started talking about the denuclearization of North Korea so that we could start moving toward reunification of the peninsula, we had members of parliaments from all over the world writing to Kim Jong-un and others in the Korean government, the North Korean government, to talk to them about ways to solve our problems in a peaceful way. And let them know that not only parliamentarians in the United States or Korea or Japan, but all around the world, we're all concerned and of one mind to solve our problems in a way that leads to peace. This is probably the most difficult time the world has ever faced. We've had wars throughout history. If you read in the Bible and the Quran and the Old Testament and New Testament, we know there have been conflicts year in, year out, century in and century out. And those conflicts were not faced with things like nuclear weapons. And as a result, they were able to survive, even though they had those conflicts, even though millions of people died. In this day and age, though, it's different. We cannot have a conflict that gets out of hand. If it does, it could lead to a catastrophe that mankind has never seen before. And that's why I always congratulate Mother Moon, Dr. Hak Jahan Moon, in her tireless efforts to get people together to talk about these things in a peaceful way. As she has led us in conferences and organizational meetings all around the world. I don't know how she does it. She works day and night, as well as her family does, in trying to lead us to peace. But she's been working on this for a long time, and I've been working with Mike and Tom and Larry and the others for some time to get everybody together so we can think alike, not in a governmental structure way. We believe in free enterprise. We believe in a government that is run by the people and not a governmental monarchy or a government like they have in communist China. But the one thing is, even though we disagree on their mode of operation and how they run their governments, the one thing we can agree on is that we can no longer run the risk of a major conflict. If we ever get to that, I'm very concerned that mankind as we know it will never exist again. So let me just end up by saying I really appreciate everything that the Washington Times, the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace, the International Association for Peace that Mother Moon and others have created. I really appreciate all the things they're doing in the meetings we're having all around the world to solve these problems. And now that the pandemic is over, maybe we could all get together once again face to face. We've been doing it through Zoom calls, which is effective and helpful, but there's nothing like looking at people face to face across the conference table and talking about the problems that we face together. So it's nice to be with all of you today. You have a different perspective from all of us who are talking today about how we can work together and solve our problems. But the one thing I'd like to leave you with today is that mankind must find a way to work together. We've had conflicts, we've had wars, we've had problems throughout history, but we're at a time now when we must sit down together and work our problems out in a peaceful way, even if we disagree on governmental policies and how we treat our citizens and what kind of a governmental structure we have. All those things may be different, but the one thing we need is a road to peace. And Mother Moon has created these roads to peace all over the world. She's had the young people riding bicycles in various countries in trips for peace. And she's helped create, as I said, the International Association of Parliamentarians for Peace and these other organizations that Mike has been talking about today. But we need to continue on the path we're on. If we don't, we'll regret it. And so with the tragedy of the virus almost behind us, we will once again be able to go back to Korea, to Japan, and to other parts of the world, and to China, and to other places, and talk face to face with people about our differences, and let them know that we, hopefully along with them, want to find a road to peace and a solution to the problems that we face in the world without another conflict. And with that, Mike, I'll be glad to answer any questions if you like. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you today.
Thank you, Congressman Burton, for your excellent leadership and everything that you're doing. There are many questions that have come in. One is the Singapore summit that President Trump held with Kim Jong-un was June 12, 2018. 261 days later, they had the Vietnam summit. I know that you really respect the policies that President Trump and his team developed. And would you identify what you thought that was the best about that effort in terms of moving things forward? And also what your advice for the Biden administration would be now? They are considering and reviewing things. They just had a review, and they are really sticking with a number of the policies and concerned with in relation to China and North Korea right now. So, Congressman Burton, your ideas about the Singapore, how Trump advanced things, and what should President Biden do?
I'm glad you asked that question, Mike. I think it's extremely important that we talk about that. I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee for 30 years. And one of the things I was very concerned about year in and year out on the Foreign Affairs Committee and with different presidential administrations was that we have a policy that varies from administration to administration. One administration is very strong on national defense and very strong on foreign policy. And then we have another one that comes along and they decide to cut the defense budget and not have a real strong foreign policy. And one of the things that I've said before, and I feel very strongly about right now, is we need to develop a foreign policy and a defense strategy that is consistent from administration to administration. One of the things that I really admired about President Trump in the meetings he had at Singapore and elsewhere with Kim Jong-un was that he talked to them about working together, about wanting to solve our problems in a peaceful way, about wanting to help North Korea, for instance, with their economic problems. But the one thing he talked about in a very strong way was the need to move in a direction toward everlasting or lasting peace. And one of the things he talked about was nuclear disarmament in North Korea and a peaceful resolution of the Korean Peninsula and a reunification of North and South Korea. And he did it in a very strong way. Now, he let Kim Jong-un know at that meeting he wanted to work with him. And they seemed to develop a relationship, not an agreement on everything, political or governmental, but they looked eye to eye and face to face, and they realized that they both wanted to solve this problem. At least that's the impression I believe that President Trump received. And the one thing he stressed very strongly to Kim Jong-un was that while we wanted to work with them, we wanted to make sure that we kept a strong amount of pressure on them to start the denuclearization process. And we imposed sanctions and other things on North Korea that they didn't like, and they rebelled against it. But the one thing I think that Kim Jong-un realized was that we had a president and an administration that was dedicated to making sure we are heading in a long-term, strong and peaceful direction. And as a result, I think Kim Jong-un did move in some directions that were in a direction that we would call a peaceful direction. Now we have a new president, and President Biden seems to have a different foreign policy approach or attitude toward not only North Korea, but other parts of the world. And I would suggest to him, if I were talking to him, and I may not do that in the near future, I've talked to President Trump and all the presidents before him, but if I were talking to him, I'd say, while you're talking to Kim Jong-un, President Kim Jong-un, while you're talking to other leaders around the world, please make sure, President Biden, that you let them know while we want peace and we want to work together and we want to help them solve many of their economic problems. What we don't want is the threat of another conflict or conflagration. And toward that end, I would say to President Biden, please be strong, be resolute, be fair, be kind and gentle, but let them know that you speak strongly and you're going to be tough. Ronald Reagan said it so well many, many years ago when he negotiated with President Gorbachev. And Gorbachev kind of kidded with him many times when they were met. And they became very good friends. As a matter of fact, when President Reagan died, Gorbachev flew halfway around the world to be at his funeral. And that lets you know that they really developed a personal relationship, even though they had strong differences. And I hope we can do that same thing with President Biden, Kim Jong-un, and leaders around the world. But the one thing Gorbachev understood was that he was going to be dealing with a very strong man in Reagan, and he was going to be resolute in making sure that the things we believe were necessary for peace were going to be upheld. And Reagan used to say to me and others many times, strength, peace through strength. Let our adversaries know we want peace, we want to work with them, but we're going to be so strong that if we ever have to go into another conflict, they will not win. Let them know we want peace, and we're going to do it through strength. And we're going to stand up to them and say, we want peace, but if there is a conflict, it's something that you'll regret and the whole world will regret. And so I would say to Biden, and I've given a long dissertation here, Mike, I apologize for that.
Very good. Very
If President Biden is listening, or any of his contemporaries or people in his administration, I would say, I know you're more liberal than President Trump. I know you have strong differences, but remember one thing, Mr. President, and that is be strong, be resolute, and let our enemies and friends alike around the world know that we're going to have peace through strength, and we're going to verify everything that we agree to. Thanks, Mike.
Wow, excellent. Congressman Burton, peace through strength. And you are so right about President Reagan and President Gorbachev had a friendship and a working relationship out of mutual respect. They didn't agree, but the mutual respect, and that Berlin Wall did come tumbling down. When Father Moon and Mother Moon went to North Korea to meet Kim Il-sung, they had the same position totally. They were told they weren't going to meet the chairman, and Reverend Moon didn't hold back. He didn't give anything, soft. He made it very clear that the communist ideology denies God and it will never work. You can never have peace with that ideology because it denies God and it denies freedom. He also told them very directly that the Juche ideology also for the same basic reasons won't work. Well, the interesting thing was that Chairman Kim, who was in the same complex, heard that Reverend Moon had told him his ideology was wrong. And he could have done anything at that point. They weren't representing any government, or there was no diplomacy to protect them. But he then invited him to the meeting for lunch. And they talked. And I'll tell you, just like you said with Reagan and Gorbachev, that engagement never stopped. It passed on from Father Moon to Mother Moon. And Kim Jong-il continued in that friendship and had representatives of the Washington Times there to discuss how to communicate better with America, and Kim Jong-un. Now there's an open communication. There's communication there. It's positive. We don't want war, and we also want to be in peace with China and with Japan, Korea, South and North, and Russia. We want all the parties together. So you're right on target, Dan. Strength gives us strength with also care gives respect, and we really want to see that.
Can I say one more thing, Mike, real quick? President Reagan, I believe, he talked before the United Nations at one time, and he talked about what would we do as a world, as all the governments of the world, what would we do if there was a threat? And a lot of people don't believe in aliens from outer space and everything, and I understand that. But he asked this question before the United Nations: what would we do as a world if there was an external threat? Would we fight with each other? Would we always be at each other's throat? Of course not, he said. And he was making a point that we need to move toward a unified world, not a world that agrees with each other or everything, but one that realizes there's more important things than one country's goals or another country's goals. The survival of humanity is the thing that we have to be concerned about. And how can we work together to make sure that we achieve that goal?
Very good. Mr. Co-Chairman of IAPP and also Congressman Dan Burton, you're really got our full support globally. And I'd like to move to Congressman Tiahrt for a moment. Congressman Tiahrt, you were with Dan in Japan for our Japan Factfinder and to Korea too. But in Japan, we were briefed by members of the Diet about 7 times. We had private meetings with a group of 10 members of the Diet. One of them became the foreign minister. Another became, the foreign minister of defense. Right after our discussions, it was very good. What was your impression on how America can help Japan and South Korea strengthen their alliance? There's historical pain between the two countries. How do we work that out? What did you learn from your Japan trip?
Well, we've had, a dubious history between our two countries for sure in the past with World War II. But since then, we have learned to lock arms in public ways that are easily detectable and discerned, like our trade, our policies of trade. And we've also learned to work behind the scenes with our intelligence apparatus and with our militaries, coordinating our efforts, building in a method that complements each other, operating in the Pacific Ocean in ways that complements each other's economies. So we've grown a lot as as two countries. And what I have seen is that even when we know there's a need to be allies, both economically and defense, there's always a little pushback from adversarial political parties or from people who are just not well informed, or those that want to pursue something other than a peaceful existence, coexistence. So what I learned from these meetings is that there are people in both governments that see the bigger picture, that see this grander vision of a peaceful world and are willing to work behind the scenes in our intelligence community, as well as through our economies and our more public ways to work in a method that complements the process of obtaining peace, that complements our each other's economies. You know, we still are doing things to try to compete in a free market economy, but we're doing so in a way that is not undermined or illegal or behind the scenes. We're working cooperatively towards common goals in different fashions. And I think that's what I learned most, is that there are good people in China, there are good people in Japan, there's good people in Korea. We just have to find them and get them motivated, get their shoulder to the wheel of this peace process. And so these trips have been very valuable because we have made these connections, these links. And I think it expands in these other countries. When we've gone back to Korea, we find that there are a few more in the legislature, in the parliament, excuse me, that are aware of our efforts and they want to be part of it. And I think it's the same in the Diet in Japan, that these visits and the awareness of that there is an effort to make a more peaceful world, both publicly and also privately behind the scenes, I think they want to be part of that. I think they want to get their shoulder to the wheel. So they've been very productive. We've met some wonderful people. You know, at the end of the day, we still put our pants on one leg at a time. We still all need to make sure that we nourish ourselves. We have common interests, but above all, we want to let our kids and grandkids grow up in a peaceful world. And I think that's at the heart of many, many people. We just have to get them on the team, make them aware there's something they can do, and have them join together and push this peace process down the road.
Thank you, Congressman Tiahrt. I think the example you just gave us gives us hope for the future. At the time of the end of World War II, when MacArthur came to Japan and he wanted to rebuild Japan, there were many in America that really criticized him for that, saying that it's an irrevocable enemy, they're terrible, they can never be trusted, they can never be friends. How can you even think that they can be friends? And MacArthur proved differently. He, instead of removing all the people that had served under the emperor, he left most of the administrators in place, and everybody cried out they can't be trusted and so forth. But actually he understood the Japanese culture, that if you take care to respect them, they'll rebuild. And he helped to write the Constitution there. In fact, he did write the Constitution. It was edited some, but you know, he gave voting rights for women. He demanded that school education was mandatory for all. And Japan is a great, once they get clear about their direction, they're really the best, and they become the best friend and best ally, you know. And I think that I'm a little bit, you know, biased on that because my wife is from Japan, but I'll tell you, she's the best, and Japan is really the great ally of America. And I think there's no reason why, when we look at Vietnam, who could imagine Vietnam could become an ally to America? It is now. It is a solid ally to America. Bill Stoner just asked, why doesn't China just pull the plug on North Korea? Well, the answer is manyfold, but because we're out of time, I'll just answer shortly. They want North Korea to remain as a buffer. Their view of America is that we are an enemy, and we simply want to have North Korea united with the South so that we can have our military poised right on their border to destroy them. That's their view. And that reason, they don't want to let North Korea go. But they also don't want North Korea to become a nuclear state, because they know If it does, then Japan will push for that, and South Korea would rightfully push for that, and proliferation will occur. So I'm really grateful, Congressman Burton. This has been a very important session. You have a lot of depth of understanding and experience, and both of you are outstanding at working with people across the aisle. I mean, you talk about North and South Korea. How about the Democrats and the Republicans?
Yeah.
I think both of you have been outstanding in maintaining. One of Congressman Burton's good friends is Charlie Rangel, Democrat from New York. And Todd, you're very good friends with many of your colleagues on the Hill, both sides. So you've been great at building that hope for America. I would like to just end with Larry Moffat for a second here, but I want to do that by showing his picture with Kim Il-sung. And that's a great thing to take away. Can everybody see that? Larry was a little bit younger, redder. But great. He's a great diplomat too. He's been in every effort of this work to bring peace from the 1980s on, and he's been all over the world. South America, he lived there. Russia, he was there. He was there in North Korea. He's a very, very honorable and very kind person, but he's also very, very determined to bring peace. And why is this important? Well, it wasn't just a photo op or a handshake. There were many engagements after that, and then it went on to Kim Jong-il, and then it went to Kim Jong-un right now. And, again, we don't agree with many of the things going on, but we've got to show them a way to come out of this current conflict. So therefore, this engagement is highly important. And Kim Jong-un has extended his invitation once again to Mother Moon to bring Congressman Burton and Congressman Tiahrt and a delegation to the North. When the time's right, I'm sure that will happen. By the way, it was just announced last month that former Secretary General of the United Nations has agreed to be the advisor and honorary chairman of Think Tank 2022, which was founded by the same effort. And Think Tank 2022 is Congressman Burton's key role there, Congressman Tiahrt. There's almost 10,000 now diplomats, former, current members of Parliament, business, religious, media people, all associating on that because we want to solve this problem in Northeast Asia together with all of the countries. We need all of our partners, and even those who are not friends with us right now. We got to find a way, like Dan said, we got to find a way to peace. Larry, you've got the final word for today. Thank you so much for all of our panelists. Thank you. Go ahead, Larry. You can close us out and give us our direction.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That's picture brings back a lot of memories. And so that's what I looked like at my best, and it will never come back again. This has been an amazing, not only just a trip down memory lane, but it's also been a chance to really reassess why we do this and why we spent so much time and so much effort making these friends across great divides, enormous divides that separate us with a lot of hostility. And it has made me realize in doing this work that the truth of what has been said by Father Moon and Mother Moon and others, that the only way to get rid of an enemy is to make them a friend. Next week, we have a incredible assessment, kind of an assessment of Biden policy. There was just recently a White House review of North Korea. That's going to be a very interesting thing. That will be on the 29th. And we have coming up between then and now an international leadership conference, which you'll be getting some information on, which has 9 sessions that deal with every kind of aspect of relations between the U.S. and not only the Korean Peninsula, North and South Korea, but also China, Russia, and everybody involved in Northeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific. So it's going to be just a fabulous set of meetings, and we hope you'll be part of that. That'll be Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Thank you very much, Congressman Tiahrt and Congressman Burton, for coming on, and thank you also, Dr. Jenkins, as always, for being such a capable administrator and moderator of this. Good night, everybody. Be sure to drive safe.
Okay.